What's up, y'all? So I got something on me that I really need to get off. I've been going in, I know, on the statuses like I always do, but I gotta say this in video form so that I can post it on YouTube. But if you're on YouTube, you'll know by now I posted it. Whatever the case may be. I wrote a status about how it's very problematic to me how the LGBTQ community wants to compare the fight for LGBT rights to the fight for civil rights. It's not the same thing. And I said that the comparison of the LGBTQ plus community, the comparison of their fight for rights to the fight for blacks for civil rights, it really tells what the world thinks about blacks. Because the question is this: are we human, or did we fight for rights to be human? No matter what happened in slavery, no matter how we were treated as slaves, no matter how we were considered as 3/5 of a man, all that crap, it doesn't matter. Because from the beginning of time, Africans, black people, other minorities have always been human. Have always been human. So we didn't have to fight to become a human. We are humans. The LGBTQ community doesn't have to fight to be human either. So there are civil rights that we all have because we're just humans. Now, it's not wrong. Okay, so let me not get ahead of myself. So we all have a right. As humans, we all have a right. No matter if somebody wanted to call you 3/5 of a human, or say you're not human, or treat you like you're not a human, blacks have always had the freedom to be, they've not always had the freedom to be human, because if they've always had the freedom to be human, then they wouldn't have never been slaves. Blacks have always been humans. Minorities have always been humans. Other people that's been marginalized have always been humans. And there's rights that humans have, and we've had to fight for our rights, whether that's been fighting for civil rights, or whether that's been gays, lesbians, transgenders, whatever, fighting for rights. But those are human rights. Those aren't LGBTQ rights. I also made this comparison that to fight for the right to get married based off of color, to fight for interracial marriage, it's never been a problem in God's eyes. You can marry who you want. Now, if you're fighting to marry an animal, that's a whole nother thing, because that's unnatural. But you can't compare the fight to win in having interracial marriage. You can't compare interracial marriage to marriage of the same sex, because it's fundamentally different. I don't care, you white, black, or whatever, you're still a human, and you're still a woman, and you're still a man. So if an interracial man, or if a black man wants to marry a white woman, he should be able to, because color doesn't make a person less of a human. But when it comes to fighting for, what the LGBTQ community would label as a right, as far as the right for a man to marry a man, that's a totally different thing. But then, just to jump ahead a little bit more, I say that even in that, you shouldn't have to fight for the right to do what you want to do, because we were all born with the right to choose. We can choose to do whatever we want to do. We can choose to do whatever we want to do, because that's our God-given right. If we want to choose to sleep with the same sex, to have a relationship with the same sex, we can choose to do that. If we want to choose to murder somebody, we can choose to murder somebody. We're free to do that. If we want to choose to run a red light, we're free to do that. If we want to choose to do any of the atrocities, we can choose to do that, because man is fundamentally free. He can do what he wants. Now, the other thing about it is we don't get to choose consequences. If there's a law that says don't murder, and you choose to murder, you got to pay the consequence for murdering somebody, because it was wrong and you broke a law. Yeah, you have the choice to do whatever you want to do, and you chose to murder somebody. You don't get to say that I don't deserve to go to prison for life for murdering somebody. No, you chose to murder somebody, and you don't get to choose the consequences. Other people get to choose how they're going to deal with you. So what does that have to do with the whole conversation of the LGBTQ community and the fight against saying that it's wrong? I want to let you guys know, anybody, if you Christian or not, if you disagree with homosexuality, if you disagree with transgenderism, if you disagree with all of that, it is not wrong in any estimation. It's not wrong to say that you disagree, because that's your God-given right. Your God-given right is to voice that. Is to say, I don't believe that. It's your God-given right. It's your God-given right to disagree with someone. What I don't agree with is this. I don't think that it's right that because you don't agree with a gay person to refuse a service such as baking a cake. I think that's bullcrap. I think that's stupid. And I think that the people that did that, I think that the people that refused the service of baking a cake for a gay couple, I think that that's wrong, because that's a service. That's a service that anybody can have. Yes, you have the right to refuse service, but you refusing the service of a gay couple that wants a cake for their wedding is almost, I would venture to say it is just the same as refusing to serve a black person in a diner because they're black and you're racist and you don't want them to eat at a diner. In that respect, the fight is same, because it's a civil right. But when it comes to rights such as marriage, if a pastor doesn't believe in homosexual marriage, that's great. That person, he reserves the right to refuse to marry you and it not be discriminatory, because you have plenty other choices to get married other places. The state doesn't disallow you to get married. So you don't have to force somebody that doesn't have convictions like you to marry you. That's predatory. You don't go to somebody else's space, go to somebody else's church and force them to marry you to make a statement. If you're gay, if you want to get married, go to the courthouse where gay marriage is okay by the state and get married by the state. But I think that to take up arms and to try to get representation in the church and to get a pastor who doesn't agree with your lifestyle and the way that you choose to live and your choices, to make them marry you and then to try to guilt trip them like they don't love you because they won't marry you, is a bunch of hogwash shit. It's really stupid. Everybody has a right to do whatever they want, but you don't have a right to choose the consequences. And I don't think that it's right if somebody doesn't agree with gay marriage that you should take it upon yourself to make them agree with gay marriage and to take and bring the state in it and make the state make it a crime for you to say that you disagree. That's not cool. So I said a lot in this that I won't repeat. Y'all can go and repeat and look at it again. I got to tend to home. Last thing I want to say is this. In the book of Daniel, there was a story about how these people had, things against Daniel, and they convinced the king to basically make a decree that that if you didn't bow at the image of the king or whatever, when they sounded the gong, that you would be thrown into the lion's den or whatever the case may be. So Daniel did nothing wrong with saying, hey, that's not what I believe in. I reserve the right not to have to bow down to the image of this God. It's my God-given right. Even though there was a law that was created that said that if you don't do this, you're going to get thrown in the lion's den. Daniel knew, and he chose to rebel. What comes to mind now is like what Dr. Martin Luther King said about rebelling against an unjust law. And we live in a time where there are unjust laws being created. There's laws being created that's going to, discriminate against other people for discriminating against people. I don't agree with discrimination, but there is nothing wrong with saying that something is wrong. There's nothing wrong with voicing your conviction about a thing. It's funny that the LGBTQ community wants tolerance, but they can't tolerate when somebody doesn't agree with them. There's a whole bunch of people that are not okay with LGBTQ community members getting beat and mistreated and all this other stuff. So I think that there got to be a lot of balance when it comes to what you're actually saying. Because it seems like the LGBTQ community and the gay people and people that aren't even gay, there's an agenda where, you know, you just want to do what you want to do, and anybody that stands in your way, you're going to make an example out of them or cancel them and all this other stuff. And it's time up for that. You got a God-given right to speak. You don't have a right to, I was going to say you don't have a right to really harm people, but by virtue of you having a choice, By virtue of you having choice, I guess you do have a right to do whatever you want to do, but that's why there are other laws to penalize you for what you do. So people can choose to murder, people can choose to do whatever, and they got to suffer consequences. So what I'm simply saying is that if you have something to say it. You know, don't take it upon yourself to exercise judgment on a person or whatever. You let God sort out the details or whatever. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with a Christian standing on their convictions that it is not okay, that homosexuality is wrong. You can refuse to marry. I'm about to go. You can refuse to marry a homosexual couple, and you can send them to the courthouse to get married, and guess what? They can still come to your church and hopefully be convicted by the Holy Spirit. Nobody's refusing people coming to church because you're gay. And anybody that's doing that, you're a lame. You don't refuse nobody coming to your church because they're gay. That's totally outside of what God is even about. So no, you don't refuse anybody from coming to your church because they're gay. No. Now, you can have a relationship with people and you can, refuse them to be in certain areas of ministry or whatever based off of, the relationship goes, I mean, because if it wasn't that, then that means that if you are living a fornicating life, that you shouldn't be sat down for living an immoral lifestyle. But how come nobody brings or raises an issue or cries injustice if they're sat down for hoeing around, or if they're sat down for living a immoral lifestyle? Nobody's gonna bring a case to the state and cry injustice because they have an understanding. But how come if somebody was sat down because they were living a lifestyle of homosexuality, how come then all of a sudden where a case was that one person wasn't sat down? Or how come, let me get this right before I end. How come if somebody is sat down for fornicating or doing any other kind of sin, they understand and they don't raise an issue against the pastor or the leadership because they understand that it's not discrimination? Why is it different if there's a person that, according to the Bible, and according to the convictions of the church, homosexuality is wrong? So what makes it discrimination to sit down somebody that's entertaining a homosexual lifestyle? What makes somebody being sat down because they're entertaining a homosexual lifestyle any different than somebody getting sat down that's entertaining a life of adultery or fornication? What makes the difference? There is no difference. It's just that there's this spirit behind this whole LGBT community stuff where, y'all basically want to be in every area. Y'all want to have representation in every area. And that's all well and great. But you got to realize that people have rights too. And we can say what's right and wrong. And we can listen and learn and have peaceable conversations with you all too. But some parts of this fight is beyond just preventing discrimination. Some parts of this fight is definitely y'all are trying to change it, to do a changing of the guard or whatever the case may be. I'm gonna go because I'm being distracted, but I think I got my point across. And yeah, so don't be afraid to speak. Don't be afraid to speak. For you Daniels out there, you people of God, God has shut up the mouths of the lions in this LGBT community, and you can say what's right. Let God be the judge. Here we go. All right. See y'all.